Tiberius. Tiberius abandoned the politics of Rome to live in a secluded villa on the island of Capri, ruling the empire through absolute fear and paranoia. By the age of 87, his frail body finally gave out and he collapsed into a deep coma. Believing the end had come, the court doctors officially declared him dead, prompting the palace to erupt in immediate celebration as everyone rushed to congratulate the young Caligula as the new ruler of the world. But the party was cut short when a terrified servant announced that Tiberius had suddenly opened his eyes and was asking for food. Panic gripped the crowd, knowing a furious Tiberius would execute them all for treason. Before Caligula could despair, the Praetorian prefect Macro took control. He rushed into the bedchamber, gathered a massive pile of heavy clothes and blankets, and smothered the old emperor to death, ensuring he would never speak again. Caligula. Caligula ruled as an unpredictable, sadistic tyrant who drained the treasury, humiliated the Senate, and demanded to be worshipped as a living god. His erratic cruelty made him enemies everywhere, but the ultimate betrayal came from the men sworn to protect him. During a sports festival, Caligula walked down a narrow, dimly lit underground corridor in the palace to get some air away from the crowds. Waiting in the shadows was Cassius Chaerea, a captain of the Praetorian Guard whom Caligula had constantly mocked with cruel insults. Chaerea stepped forward, drew his sword, and struck the first blow, slicing deep into the emperor's neck. Caligula cried out that he was still alive, but the rest of the conspirators rushed in like a pack of wolves, stabbing him over 30 times, driving blades into his chest and face until he was an unrecognizable mass of flesh on the cold stone floor. Claudius. Claudius was a surprisingly capable administrator, but his downfall was his fourth wife, Agrippina, who was fiercely determined to see her own son Nero take the crown. Agrippina hired Rome's most notorious poisoner to lace a plate of exquisite wild mushrooms, Claudius's favorite dish, with a lethal toxin during a palace banquet. As Claudius ate, the poison took hold and he began to choke, but his body fought back, and he tried to vomit the food up, threatening to survive the attempt. Fearing her plan was failing, Agrippina signaled the emperor's personal doctor, who was secretly in on the plot. Under the guise of helping the gasping emperor clear his throat, the doctor pushed a wild feather coated in a fast-acting, highly concentrated poison down Claudius's throat, causing immediate respiratory failure and ensuring Nero's ascension. Nero's reign was defined by wild extravagance, artistic delusions, and total disregard for the Roman elite. When a massive rebellion broke out, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy, sentencing him to be beaten to death in public. Terrified, Nero fled the city disguised in rags, hiding in a dingy room at a loyal servant's country villa. He wept, crying out about what a great artist the world was losing, until the thundering sound of horse hooves echoed through the night. The soldiers had arrived to arrest him. Lacking the courage to do it himself, Nero forced a sharp dagger against his neck, hesitating until his secretary pressed his hand forward, driving the blade deep into his throat. When the soldiers burst through the door, Nero looked up with failing eyes and choked on his own blood. Galba. Galba was an old, tight-fisted general whose refusal to pay standard military bonuses quickly turned the legions against him. Suffering from severe gout and unable to walk, he was carried through the crowded streets of the Roman Forum in a litter, completely unaware of the danger. Suddenly, rebel cavalry burst into the square. The crowd scattered in terror, and Galba's personal bodyguards abandoned him, tipping his litter onto the hard pavement. The old emperor looked up at the approaching soldiers, threw his neck forward, and told them to strike if it was for the good of Rome. They showed no mercy, hacking at his limbs and stabbing him repeatedly through his breastplate. A soldier sliced off his bald head, but since there was no hair to hold it by, he stuck his thumb deep into the dead man's mouth to carry the bloody trophy away. Vespasian. Vespasian stabilized the empire after a year of bloody civil war, founding the Flavian dynasty and beginning construction on the Colosseum. He was a practical, down-to-earth man with a sharp sense of humor that stayed with him until his final days. In the summer of 79, he contracted a severe, agonizing case of systemic illness that caused uncontrollable diarrhea and left him physically incapacitated. As the disease drained the life from his body, Vespasian maintained his sarcastic wit, joking to his doctors that he felt himself turning into a god. On his final morning, as the fatal wave hit him, he refused to die lying down in bed like a commoner, declaring that an emperor should always die on his feet. With the last of his strength, he forced his trembling body upright, taking one final gasping breath before collapsing back, dead. Commodus was the megalomaniacal emperor who abandoned governing to fight as a gladiator in the arena, pretending to be Hercules reborn. His inner circle realized his mounting insanity threatened their lives, so they orchestrated a desperate assassination plot. On New Year's Eve, his mistress mixed a slow-acting poison into his post-workout wine. Commodus drank it, but instead of dying, he suffered a violent fit of vomiting, purging the toxin before it could stop his heart. Fearing immediate execution by morning if the emperor recovered, the panicked conspirators acted fast. They sent for Narcissus, Commodus's muscular personal wrestling coach. Narcissus slipped into the imperial bathhouse, crept up behind the intoxicated emperor in the steaming water, and locked his arms around his neck, strangling him until he drowned in his own bath. Caracalla was a brutal, military-obsessed tyrant who ruled through fear, executing his own brother to secure sole power. While leading a massive campaign against the Parthian Empire, his paranoia made enemies among his own staff, including a prefect who recruited a disgruntled soldier to assassinate him. During a long march through the blistering desert heat, Caracalla ordered the column to halt so he could pull his horse to the side of the road to relieve his bladder. His bodyguards stepped back to give him privacy, leaving him isolated on the roadside. Seizing the perfect opening, the assassin broke formation, slipped up behind the urinating emperor, and drove a concealed dagger deep into his back, piercing his lungs. Caracalla collapsed into the dirt, dying midstream before his guards could even process what happened. Valerian suffered what is widely considered the most humiliating and agonizing end of any Roman emperor in history. While fighting the Persian Empire, an outbreak of plague devastated his ranks, forcing him to seek a personal peace meeting with the Persian king Shapur I. It was a trap, and Valerian was captured alive. For the remainder of his life, the Emperor of Rome was kept in golden chains as a prize slave, subjected to continuous psychological and physical torture. Whenever King Shapur wanted to mount his horse, Valerian was forced to get down on his hands and knees to act as a human stepping stool. When he finally died of exhaustion, Shapur ordered his body to be flayed completely, his skin dyed a bright crimson, stuffed with straw, and kept on display in the palace for generations. Valens faced a massive catastrophe when Gothic refugees rose up in a violent rebellion against Roman corruption. He led his army to confront them at the Battle of Adrianople, but the Roman lines were completely surrounded and utterly annihilated in one of Rome's worst military defeats. Valens was severely wounded by an arrow during the slaughter, and a small group of bodyguards managed to drag his bleeding body away, taking refuge inside a small wooden farm cottage nearby. The pursuing Goths surrounded the house, completely unaware that the emperor was hiding inside. When the defenders fired arrows to keep them back, the Goths gathered dry brush, piled it high against the wooden walls, and set the cottage on fire, burning Valens alive inside the blazing ruin.